Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 786. Today we're going to talk about Dune Imperium Uprising, which is a standalone / expansion for the original Dune Imperium. Now I recently talked about this on a podcast, and in that I mentioned the plays that I'd had up to that point, and I had played, I think at that point, 1, 2, 3, and 4 players. I have at this point, but I had not yet played the 6-player kind of variant mode, the team mode, where it's 3 players against 3 players. And I have now, just once, but I have. So that was kind of what I was waiting for to get at this review, because, you know, well, we'll talk more about it in the review. Let's just say that. And I'll cover everything, not just the 6-player game. I will go over some of the, minor changes and stuff that are, different between this and the base game, and some of the new additions like spies and the worms and all that stuff. I'll go down and show you about that at the table. And then I'll go a little bit into the rules for the 6-player game, the 3 versus 3 game. And then I'll come back and give you my overall general thoughts. But I was waiting to get that 6-player game in, because to me that was the most kind of unique part of this expansion. Otherwise, it would just kind of be like a regular expansion, granted with a new board and stuff. So too much to do. Let's go down to the table and then we'll come back up and talk about it. Okay, got some stuff laid out here on the table. And first thing we're going to look at, just a couple of the changes that are kind of new with this expansion. And this is kind of the expansion part of this box, because you can actually play this standalone. You can see this is a brand new board. It replaces completely the board from the base game. Now I have it on the 6-player side. There's not too much differences between the 6-player and then the 1 to 4-player side. Mostly it's the same, but I thought I would just have it on this side. Now both sides have this little spy space here, and so players can play spies out here onto the board. And so different actions, like if you go here to the espionage space, you can see you go there. It's a Bene Gesserit space. You draw a card and you can put a spy out. You can put a spy out on any of these spots here. And these spy spots are linked to multiple spots on the board. So if you go up here out onto Arrakis itself, you can see there's multiple spots out here that connect to spies. And what happens is, let's just zoom in a tight bit there, is let's say somebody else has gone to one of the connected spots here, like the spice refinery. Having a spy there allows me to place my agent there, and then without being blocked. And when that happens, I'll pull the spy off. So I've used up that spy there. Now the other thing you can do with the spy is you can put that there, and then if you want to, pull that off of your own free will, and then you just draw a card from your deck. The other part is there will be other cards and things that will interact with the spies that are out there. So they may say, like, as an example, here's an intrigue card that kind of works both ways. So you can either put a spy out on a blue spot, which is one of those, or remove a spy, and if you do, then you can, in this case, break the shield wall, and get 2 spies. And so there's some other cards and things like that that will interact with the spies in that case. And the other major new thing is if we go down here to the battle area, get these house cards out of the way, and we can take a look here. We can see kind of the same sort of battle area that we had before with the 4 quadrants, and you'll get troops out here and so on. Now the next thing that you can do is you can summon here a worm to your section of the battlefield. The game comes with wooden worms and plastic worms. They are not different mechanically, but that's what you've got. Now to get a worm out though, you have to have gotten these maker hooks. You just have to do it once. Once you get the maker hooks, then you can go and recruit worms to fight in the battle. Now if you see down here, the worms are worth 3 points in the battle, or 3 strength. And swords are 1, troops are 2, worms are 3. Worms will go away. They'll go back into the desert after the battle has happened. However, if you win a battle or place in a battle, you get some reward in a battle, then you will get double the reward. So let's take a look here at an example of a reward card there. And so we can see here, so if I had gotten first place, then I could do that twice. So I could get basically 2 points. I could claim the Imperial Basin twice, which is meaningless, and I could spend 4 spice to get another victory point twice. So I could get 4 points out of that, and you only need 10 points to win, so that's almost half your points. Whereas if I got second, instead of 5 spice, I could get 10 spice, as long as I had a worm. So it really ramps up the fight and the conflict when those worms kind of come out. Now, a couple other things to notice about these cards here. You can see this little symbol here. A lot of the early intrigue cards, this is a level 3, but like the 1s and 2s don't really have a lot of points as much as they used to in the base game. But everybody will start with a symbol here. So you've got a Muad'Dib and Chris Knife, an Ornithopter, another thing there. And if you get a set here, so let's say I had started the game with this Ornithopter here and then collected this one here, and you actually won that battle card. When you win, you keep the card. And then once you have a set of 2 of these, you'll turn both cards face down, this and that, and then you'll just get a victory point. So there's a little bit of kind of a delayed victory point. It works kind of interestingly because it sort of sweetens things up a little bit and makes people maybe prevent you from getting a card that they normally wouldn't care about necessarily, because sometimes, you know, the rewards will be more or less useful kind of depending on your situation. That's a nice little kind of wrinkle there. Now, the last thing I'll mention is these 2 contract spaces here on the board. Now, this is kind of like an optional mini expansion that comes with the game, so it says you can play with or without those. I would assume play with them. There's no harm in that. There'll be spaces on the board and cards and stuff like that that'll allow you to go and collect a contract. You just go and grab one of the 2 face-up contracts for free, and they will give you a few different things. So these 2 are pretty straightforward. So this means if I go to that espionage space I showed you earlier, in addition to doing that, I will get $3, 3 Solaris, and then I turn that face down. And so that will count as a completed contract. Once that's taken by somebody, you know, a new one will come out here. And a lot of these are like giving you sort of incentives to go to a space to get something a little bit extra. Now you can see this Sardaukar one, there's 2 of these in the stack. If you are playing the Emperor Shaddam, then you will start with those 2 contracts in front of you. It allows you to have kind of a big turn. If you go to the Sardaukar, you can fulfill those contracts. And there's some other cards here or contracts here. Let's just use a couple of examples like this one here. If you harvest 3 or more spice, you get extra money. If you purchase a Spice Must Flow card, you get to go up on the guild track and then get $3. So they're just little incentivizers that you will always play with if you've got Shaddam IV in play. But you don't always have to play with them. I would recommend just playing with them. Now, a couple things to notice about the team game. So that's all the basic changes there. So first thing about the team game is you will see here we've got a little bit different of a scoring track. So if you are an ally, there will be 2 allies and 1 commander. The allies start on the 1-point part of the track, and the commanders will start on the 4 points. So at the end of the game, you are going to total up all the points for your team. So you're going to have 2 allies on your team, and using an appropriate color here, have 1 commander. So we get all these up here. Let's say we've got like this. So in this case, the game will end as soon as 1 player, and then would be 6 markers out here on the track. As soon as 1 player hits 10, just like normal, but then you total up everybody's points. So if this is 1 team, we'd have 10 plus 14, so everybody would have 24 points. So when you win battles, if anybody's getting points, it's good for your team because that effectively is points for your team. And so you might, if you're in the battle with somebody else, because you're still sort of effectively competing against each other in a way, but you might say, you know what, I want a little bit more spice, and it's fine if you get the points and I don't. Not a big deal. And so it gets a little bit interesting that way and adds a different dynamic. Now, the commanders do not participate in the battles. The commanders do not go up on the different faction tracks that we can see here. And one thing that you can notice here is if we look up here, this is normally like the Imperial track, but this is called the Great Houses track on this side of the board here, because again, this is the 6-player side. Whereas if we go down here, this is the Fringe Worlds track, not the Fremen track. So in the case of the 6-player game, the commander for the Emperor, which is always Shaddam IV, will have their own little faction track here, and only they are going up that track. They'll have the one little cube that goes up, and then they have a couple of spaces that they can access here. And so the interesting thing about this is the Emperor's team, their whole team, cannot get maker hooks and cannot summon the worms, because that makes, if you've seen the movies or read the books, that makes perfect sense. There's no way they would be able to do that. And so you can still get a couple of victory points out of here. There's a little victory point token thing there. When you hit these spaces, you will distribute from the bank 1 Solari to every player on your team. And then also every player on your team could place a spy in that case. The other thing here with Muad'Dib on the other side, same idea here. You go up the track, distribute spice, distribute water. And then the interesting thing about this is when one of Muad'Dib's allies gets maker hooks, they both get them. Okay, and they've got their own little spots here. So if the two teams I've been showing you, yellow and red, one of them gets maker hooks, they both get it. They can both summon worms for the rest of the game. Now, the other thing to note about the worms is you also have this spot up here. This is the shield wall. There is a spot here. I showed you a card earlier that could do it. There's also a spot on the board. We'll just zoom in. This little symbol here means destroy the shield wall. Now, when we were looking at, here we go, this card from before, this was the battle for their Imperial Basin. And you cannot send worms to any battles that are depicting places that are inside here, basically Arrakeen. This is the main capital city of Iraq. It's surrounded by a bunch of rocks and mountains and stuff. The worms can't get in there. There's no way for them to physically get in there until the shield wall gets destroyed. Then and only then can you summon worms in a round where this battle card is depicted. And once the shield wall is destroyed, it's destroyed for the rest of the game. So if you're not, really participating in the worm game, then you don't want to destroy that shield wall. You want to prevent people from doing that. So just so we are clear on that, there are restrictions on this space and some other spaces. So you need 2 influence here, and then you can get maker hooks and recruit a soldier, and then you can break the shield wall. So the Emperor's team in the 6-player game was not really ever going to want to go there. But the places to recruit worms are down here, and this is where you get spice. And this is the same on the other side of the board. You're basically either getting worms or you're getting spice. So that's what there's kind of interesting thematically about what's going on. The Emperor and the Harkonnens and those guys are trying to just get spice out of the desert. And by doing so, they're blocking the Fremen from getting their sort of attack ability and Muad'Dib's allies. Whereas if Muad'Dib and them go and get the worms, they're preventing the Emperor and the Imperium from getting spice, which is cool. Now, just 2 more things. The Emperor and Muad'Dib have their own deck of starting cards. You can see by the symbol here in the upper right, you've got the Emperor symbol there, and then you've got the Muad'Dib symbol there. So these are the starting cards. They can go and they can buy decks. They play normal turns. Like I said, they don't send troops to battle. They don't, recruit up these faction boards only on their own. And then their workers are like this. So instead of agents, they get these little tokens. Now, they only start with 2 workers, just like everybody else. They have these 2 agents here. You can see there's arrows like this and like this. And then their sword master, their 3rd agent that they get, has this one. And so the way that the game works, let's zoom out a little bit. And so if I'm looking at the board like this and I'm sitting right below the bottom of the board on the planet, the Muad'Dib player sits here. So we take Muad'Dib, they sit here, okay? Emperor is out in space, he's out in the galaxy somewhere. The Emperor player will always sit there. Then your 2 allies will sit across from you diagonally. So Princess Irulan, she would sit here next to Muad'Dib, and then, because it gives you a list of who can be allied with who, and then Fade Routho would sit over here. So Muad'Dib will be surrounded by his enemies, so will Shaddam the 4th. So we have Lady Jessica up here. She's got a pretty cool ability where she takes the water of life, spoilers, and then she converts to Reverend Mother Jessica. So she would sit, let's say, over here on this side, and let's find another one. Let's put Gurney into play here. So we put him up there. So the way that you take turns, you determine start order, same as the base game. The 2 commanders will never be start player. So let's say Lady Jessica gets start player. So she will go. So that would be Muad'Dib's team. The Emperor will go, Emperor's team, back to Muad'Dib's team, Gurney, then down here, down here, down here. So you will alternate teams like so. And so that makes sense why we have these arrows now. So if I'm Muad'Dib here and I go to a spot, it's just like any other agent. But anything that the Muad'Dib player doesn't directly do, like put troops out or go up faction tracks, then this player will do that, the one pointed there. If I were to use this one instead, in that case that's pointed there, that would be Gurney. And then when I recruit my sword master, when I play this, I can choose either one. So there's a very, very interesting thing, timing things there, because maybe this player's gone, maybe they put troops in, they haven't put troops in yet. So you're trying to figure out who you want to help out. And you're also sitting across from each other. So you can't sit there on your side of the table and go back and forth and whisper and all these kinds of things. You've got to talk in the open, and you have to kind of talk. The rules say not to really have hand signals or code and stuff like that. But we found that we talked in generalities, and it's interesting because if you think of the theme of it with spies and everybody's houses and stuff like that, it's kind of interesting because they can hear you, but they probably have a good idea of what you're trying to do. So it's an interesting table dynamic for sure. So that's that. So the only other thing to mention here with these sword masters, because you get your third agent, is when you get your third agent, whether you're the commander or you're a regular player and you have a normal agent, you get that third one. You can only use that third one once in the whole game. Once you get it and you spend that third one, that one's gone forever. And you say, well, why? Well, because the board's crowded, first of all, because you've got 6 people putting stuff out. The other reason is when you get a sword master, you then get this permanently. And so the instant that you recruit your third sword master, let's say we're the red player here, we got some troops out here, and you will mark this like so. So you will always have +2 to your combat. Okay? And then if you are the commander, you put it here in the center. And then when it becomes your reveal turn, any swords or anything like that that you reveal, at that point you can choose which of your allies you're going to apply that to. So you apply all your swords to that ally. So you're going to say, oh, I'm going to try to beef you up so you can win. And you can obviously have an open discussion about that. But so the sword master gives you the +2, and don't sleep on the +2 because that will be pretty useful. So that's pretty much all the little changes and stuff. We could get into all the different powers and special abilities in the cards, but who wants to do that? Okay, so that's Dune Imperium Uprising. I'm going to go through just my main pillars of review. First off is player count. I played this all the player counts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. The game still plays great at all the player counts, including 6, which I'll leave some of the 6-player discussion towards the end. But I like it at all the player counts. If you're thinking of getting the game for any player count, I'd recommend it. The solo game is really cool. I didn't show you the new rival cards. So each of instead of using the ring ability on the faction cards, there's a special little card that gives you kind of a different ring ability that's a little bit more appropriate for solo, and there's some other little wrinkles there. So it works really well. I think it's great solo this way, and all the way through. Now play time, just playing the base game takes about the same time as the original, so an hour and a half, 2 hours. So I have not played Uprising with any of the expansions. I'll talk more about that in a second, but I just wanted to play it just by itself, see how it works by itself. Now the 6-player game, that took us almost 4 hours to do. And everybody had at least played the original Dune Imperium at least once, but it had been some time for a couple of the folks that they hadn't played it in probably at least a year or so. And there were some other folks that had played Uprising and the base game a whole bunch. So kind of a mix of folks. And there was definitely a learning curve, not in terms of the mechanics or the complexity, but just in terms of how is this kind of supposed to work? Trying to sort of suss things out and try things on and get everything figured out. So there was a little bit of a slow burn there at the beginning. And I think if we were to sit down with, a similar group of 6 people, it would go a little bit quicker. I could see the 6-player game getting done in about 3 hours. But it's a big epic experience. That's kind of what you expect out of that. And that's kind of what the point of that game is. There's even a 6-player variant. And speaking of expansions, there's rules for throwing in expansions with, kind of the normal game. There's different rules for throwing them in with the 6-player team game and all that kind of stuff. So first I'll talk about the expansions and kind of compare this as if it was just kind of an expansion to the base game and that kind of stuff. And then I'll talk about the 6-player game. So to me, the experiences of this game that I've had are just Uprising by itself. I think it's tied with the base game plus the Rise of Ix expansion. So I really Really like that expansion that adds the dreadnoughts and that kind of thing. Now you could mix all that in. You could have dreadnoughts and worms and all kinds of stuff. I think I would like to do that. I think that in some cases that's kind of a big ask for my group, because not everybody has the same level of enthusiasm. Some people like me, they really, really like it. Other people are kind of like, it's okay, or they don't like it at all. So that's kind of a tough ask. But to me, that would be kind of like, I wonder if that's kind of the gold standard. Now, there's been a lot of stuff online and some suggestions from the designers about how to actually mix in, build a card pool that's like perfect or something. Because you can take base game original Dune Imperium cards, throw them in with this, take certain cards out of Ix, out of Immortality, all that stuff. It all works together. So this is really not a new game or anything. It's just another expansion. It just happens to also be standalone and is also compatible with every other Dune Imperium, release that they've had. It's just a really big expansion. And I was actually thinking about this. I'm like, this is the first time I've seen what I would call like a super expansion. That's a stupid name. But I'm like, this is a huge expansion because it not only does it add new stuff that you could mix in with the old stuff, it kind of rejiggers the game. It has a whole 6-player format. And, and it kind of unlocks a lot of creativity, I think, in people to be able to build a custom deck. A lot of times with these deck building games, and deck building is a decent part of this game, people like to customize their deck. And I'm thinking of like Thunderstone and Ascension, because people like to play that epic Thunderstone where they throw like one of each card, or they like to build up that perfect sort of setup or set up different scenarios, especially with like Thunderstone Quest. You kind of build thematic setups. And Ascension, because the way that kind of is like plug and play with expansions, you can say, well, I'm gonna take this expansion, and maybe a couple cards from here and this. And so you can really kind of play around and set up kind of an experience there, which is really neat. I like that the game's sort of gotten to that point where, hey, there's a lot of cards here. Pick your favorites or whatever and throw them in there. Or, you don't have to do that, but it gives you the option to do that. And it gives you a bunch of different ways to play it. And I've seen where people want to play sort of like an epic experience where they play the base game, which is kind of like the first movie, if you want, the first part of the book, and then move into Uprising, which is the kind of the climax of the end of the first book and everything. So that's pretty cool that you can do all that. But yeah, so if you said, what was your favorite way to play this game? I think Rise of Ix with the base game is still there, but I just don't know if adding Ix with this game would just be too much stuff going on. Because I did like Immortality, but playing that like with Ix, it's just like, I'm not sure what I'm getting, like what I'm gaining. To me, it should be, and I think, my mind could change here over time as I try things out, but it should be discrete. It should be one of the two base games with maybe an expansion. But this kind of has an expansion built in because there's all these other things going on. Because the base game by itself, I would still play just the base game. It's still pretty pure in that way. And one of the things I really like about the base game that I don't hate about this, but I like that you can kind of win that game without doing a lot of combat sometimes. Because, if you think about it, there's not like a lot of fighting in Dune. It's like, there is, but it's also a lot of political maneuvering and stuff. Like, the bureaucracies and the intrigue and the backstabbing and all those kind of things, and the setting up the kind of like person-to-person warfare, the psychological warfare or whatever, manipulation of economies and things like that, which is a vastly important piece of everything. Resources and human capital and everything like that is super a part of conflict. It's not always just like bloodshed on a battlefield. So this focuses more on that with Uprising and not so much with the base game. Which one do I like better? I don't really care. It's like, well, I don't know, whatever. I'm not like, I have to have conflict and I have to have, blood on the field, or I have to not have blood on the field. It's just like what it is. It's whatever, right? It is whatever it's going to be. And just know that you're going to kind of get that different experience, and you can play with that different experience. To me, there's not like a better way that way. I don't think better doesn't come into the equation in that case. Okay, enough of that. So the thing that really kind of elevates this a box, and I was hoping that it would, and I was a little bit nervous how it would based on the rules and how things work out, is that 6-player team game, which is, see, that one might be my favorite way to play the game. Now that's going to be a tough ask. Like I said, getting 6 people, you need exactly 6 people. You need 6 people who want to play a team game, which isn't, necessarily easy to find because you don't see a lot of that. But there's a cool dynamic there that elevates the game to an interesting level of discussion and back and forth and teamwork and all that kind of stuff that you just don't get with the base game. And it really, the one thing that is interesting, I do like the 1979 original Dune game from, whoever made it, Avalon Hill, I guess. I don't think that's right. But Gale Force 9 has the license to that now. I do like that game. And I think that game has that interesting sort of player-to-player political negotiation dynamic among the players. This game kind of simulates that in a way through the mechanics and the card play and everything. And I think it does an amazing job of it. I don't think it's a black and white. Because we're negotiating head-to-head, that makes it a better negotiation scheming game than because you do it through mechanics. I don't think there's a better there. Maybe there's a preference from folks, I don't know. But the group experience thing is missing from just regular Dune Imperium or Dune Imperium Uprising. When you have the team game, you have that group dynamic. Because in the original 79 version, you had that shifting, you could have alliances. And you could have a 2 or 3 player alliance. And that could change the next time, a sandworm card came up. And those alliances could reshift. So there was that. This has the alliances because it's just a fixed alliance. There's no moving around, which thematically, from the 79 one doesn't make a ton of sense on the theme. Because the Fremen are not allying with the Emperor ever. There's no way. And, certain things like that. And especially when you add the expansions in, and they have the Bene Telax and the Ix and they've added some more, and it starts to be well, that's not how those factions really work, and you can say, oh, well, they could win through subterfuge or face dancers or whatever, but, whatever. But this has, sorry for the digression, this has that cool group experience that I really think people should give a look, because now when I played it, I played as Muad'Dib. I found that fascinating, and my buddy who played as the Emperor, he was like, I love it. Everybody else at the table also had a really good time. I kind of wonder if there would be a little bit on my part a fear of missing out if I were to play one of the allies and not be playing as the commander. But I don't know. Now that I think that I've played it one time, I would be good playing that, because then I've had that experience, and so now I know how to kind of talk to the commander, whoever it was, because I kind of know what they can and can't do. Whereas if you're one of the allies and you've not been the commander, you don't necessarily get a good sense until maybe you've played it through a full playthrough of how can they help me, or what can I be doing to set myself up to be helped, that kind of stuff. We had a really good discussion in the game that we played with myself and one of the allies, and they was if I could have done this in this order and it was feasible, then we could have been much better in this particular situation, because I needed, in his case, he needed water in a certain case and that kind of stuff. So that's a pretty cool, interesting dynamic there with how that works. And it's pretty interesting thematically as well, because, when you play the 1 to 4 player game, then anybody can go get the worm, doesn't really matter. In the team game, the Emperor's team can't get the worm, so they don't have that doubler for the combat. So that's a huge disadvantage. Now in the game that we played, the Emperor actually won the game, but they get a lot of other tricks that they can do to kind of make up for that, kind of bring the vast resources of the Imperium into play. So it is a very kind of asymmetric experience, strategically and tactically. Mechanically, pretty close, but that's also a very, very cool thing. And if you've watched the movie, read the books, I think you will really appreciate that team game and how that really kind of shakes out. Because it actually seemed very, very unfair at the beginning. We were this is way lopsided for Muad'Dib's team, because it's like go in there, get some worms, like blow up the shield wall right away, so we can be in every combat and just start doubling up victories, rewards. And it doesn't matter, let's get something, and you get 10 spice or whatever, and that's just going to make things awesome for you. But it definitely shifted towards the end game. It was very, very close there, and then the Emperor pulled away in the last round there. So they do get a lot of stuff in their toolbox to help out, and so that asymmetry it's just another nice element to that 6-player game. Yeah, so I mean, there's no Dune spoilers here. I think I mentioned, I might cut it out, but anyway, I'm not going to spoil anything. But if you watch my top 50 video last year, this is my number 1 board game on the list. I have a couple of games higher that aren't board games, but this is my number 1 board game. I think this makes it even more so. It's just like all the 6-player thing and all the just different configurability and all that stuff. Just really cool. And Dune is like my favorite nerd thing. So that kind of does a lot of the heavy lifting, I think. Although, I mean, if this wasn't Dune, I mean, it wouldn't exist. Nobody would make a game like this and have it be a different theme. Like sometimes people say, well, it wouldn't be so popular if it wasn't Dune. I was like, well, it wouldn't exist because nobody would just make these mechanics like out of thin air. Anyway, give me a break. Anyway, so, but for me personally, yeah, it does do some heavy lifting. I don't think you need to know Dune. Hey, but you need to know it. You need to have an idea about it. But that's it. I mean, you need to have an idea about trains, right? To play an 18xx game. Anyway, I think this game's great. I would get this expansion. You probably already got it. I was a little slow in getting this out, but I really wanted to try the 6-player experience before I reviewed it. And it was getting so late, I was like, well, I kind of want to see the second movie before I review it. And I'm like, yeah, there's nothing really to say there, but it does a good job. We got this. I think there's going to be a part 3 movie. Anyway, I recommend it. Thanks.